Hello, my people, gather around. Let me tell you a story. It is a story from my own eyes, from a time when fear had a name, and that name was Obakadir. This happened many, many years ago, when I was just a boy of 13, full of life, but also full of fear for our king. Our town, a quiet place in the north, was ruled by this man. Obakadir was not a king who loved his people. He was a king who loved power. He was a tall man, with eyes that seemed to look through you, not at you. He never listened to the wisdom of the elders. Their gray hairs and wise words meant nothing to him. If anyone dared to whisper a word against his rule, they would simply vanish, gone, like a puff of smoke in the harmattan wind. The whispers in the market were that the king did not rule alone. They said he had friends, dark and powerful friends from the spirit world, who kept him on the throne, and for their service he paid a terrible price. My job was in the palace. I wasn't a guard or a prince. I was a cleaner, a simple boy with a broom. Every night my duty was to sweep the long grand hallway that led to the king's private chambers. This hallway was always cold. Even when the sun baked the earth outside, a chill lived in that corridor. It clung to your skin and settled deep in your bones. It was a coldness that had nothing to do with the weather and the sounds. Oh, the sounds. When the palace grew quiet and everyone was asleep, I would be there sweeping, and I would hear them, whispers, soft like the rustling of dry leaves. They would slither through the air, hissing the king's name. Kadir, Kadir. I would stop, my heart pounding in my chest, and look around, but I was always alone. Or so I thought. The fear was a constant companion, but a boy must eat, so I kept sweeping, pretending I heard nothing. One night, a night I will never forget, everything changed. The air was heavy, thick with unspoken tension. The sky was dark, with no moon or stars to offer their gentle light. It was close to midnight when the king's voice boomed through the palace. He ordered everyone out, every cook, every guard, every servant, leave. He commanded, only my personal guards shall remain. People scrambled, eager to obey, eager to escape the suffocating energy that filled the palace. But I was frozen. The thought of walking home alone in that thick, starless darkness terrified me more than staying, so I did something foolish. I found a heavy velvet curtain in a small alcove off the main hall, and I hid behind it, pulling the fabric around me until I was invisible. My plan was to wait until the king was asleep, then slip out unnoticed. From my hiding spot, I could see the entrance to his private room. That is when I saw it, the thing that haunts my dreams to this day. Obakadir was not alone. He sat on a low stool, not his grand throne. Before him was a large clay pot, the kind our mothers use for storing water. But this pot was not filled with water. It was filled with something dark, something thick and red. The coppery smell of blood, fresh blood, hit me even from across the room. It was so strong it made me want to gag. Human blood. I knew it. In my soul, I knew it. And the king, he was talking to it, not praying, not chanting. He was speaking to the pot as if it were a person, a living being. His voice was low, urgent. The room was lit only by a few flickering oil lamps, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The smell of blood mixed with the scent of burning firewood and something else. Something old and rotten, like the earth from a forgotten grave. I held my breath, my body trembling behind the curtain. Suddenly, the blood in the pot began to bubble, slowly at first, then more violently. Pop, 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 like thick stew on a hot fire, but there was no fire, no heat beneath it. The pot just sat on the cold stone floor, boiling on its own. I was paralyzed, a statue made of fear. Then a voice came from inside the bubbling pot. It was not human. It was deep, gurgling, ancient. It sounded like stones grinding together at the bottom of a river, and it said with chilling clarity, "Your time is finished, Kadir." The king leaped to his feet, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. He shouted, his voice cracking, "Lies! Deceiver! I gave you what you asked for. I gave you everything." He pointed a shaking finger at the pot, his royal robe seeming to shrink around his suddenly smaller frame. But the voice did not answer. The pot just bubbled harder and harder, faster and faster. The bubbling became a furious churning, a red vortex of rage. The pot itself began to shake, vibrating on the stone floor. Then, with a sound like 1,000 cracking bones, it exploded. Blood and clay shards flew everywhere at that exact moment. The loudest thunder I have ever heard crashed directly over the palace. The whole building shook as if a giant had struck it. And then the king screamed. It wasn't a shout of anger or a cry of surprise. It was a scream of pure, unholy agony, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to be torn from the very depths of his soul. It echoed through the empty halls, through the stone walls, and out into the town. I am sure every man, woman, and child heard it that night. The lamps went out. I was plunged into absolute darkness, with only the king's fading scream and the sound of my own heart hammering against my ribs. I stayed behind that curtain all night, too terrified to move, too terrified to even breathe. I waited for the sun, praying for the dawn like never before. When the first rays of morning light finally crept through the windows, the palace guards and the elders cautiously entered the king's chambers. I crept out from my hiding place and followed them, needing to see. The room was a wreck, clay fragments and dried bloodstains were everywhere. But the king, Obakadir, was gone. Completely gone. The only thing left of him were his royal clothes, the rich agbada and his beaded cap. They were lying in a heap on his chair, not folded, but crumpled as if the body inside them had simply evaporated, and there were burn marks on the fabric, blackened edges and scorched threads, as if he had been consumed by an invisible fire from within. From that day forward, no one has ever sat on that throne again. The elders, after many prayers and rituals, sealed the palace. They locked the great doors and forbade anyone from entering. They said the place was now cursed, a home for lingering spirits. The town is peaceful now. We have a new king, a good man who listens to the elders. But the palace of Obakadir still stands on the hill, empty and silent. Sometimes when the wind blows hard from the north, people say you can still hear him. A faint, mournful cry carried on the breeze, the sound of a wicked king begging for a mercy he never gave, from a power he could not control. I never went back to the palace. I left that town and never returned. But some nights, when the moon is hidden and the air grows cold, I still dream of that night. I see the bubbling pot, and I hear that voice, that terrible gurgling voice from the blood. Thank you for listening to my story. It is a memory I carry with me always, a reminder that all power has a price. If you want to hear more stories from our land, please follow our channel. Be well and walk in the light.